Now, we already talked about freezing tracks, so let me show you some examples of where we could freeze a track and keep the processing. And what I mean by that is, let's say this, all of this bass that we have right here, and let's say I wanted to process that. Well, I can process it right here on the actual group track, and this one also goes to the group track, so it's processed right there. But let's imagine for a second that some of these, any of these synths, let's say this one. Yeah, I'm gonna unfreeze that. Okay, so I have that synth, and let's say I add a compressor onto that synth, which has a sidechain input from the kick drum, of course. So let's say I had that process, and it doesn't matter basically what it sounds like because I don't want to do this. It's already done on the group track. But let's say I had this right here only for this synth. So it actually sidechains off the kick drum, compresses every time the kick drum plays. If I wanted to freeze this track right now, I cannot. The track cannot be frozen because the routing compressor, because the compressor has an external routing. It cannot be frozen because this compressor takes as an influence a track from outside of this track. So in order to do that, in order to be able to freeze this and retain this compressor on top, I could do the following. I could make another audio track, since here I can route anything into an audio track just as if it was a group. So what I can do now is, after I created this audio track, I can select the input of that audio track to be that spire right here, right above it, so 22 spire, and I can tell that spire to go into that audio track, both of it. And now on this track, to actually hear this synth, I have to turn on the monitoring of what is being fed into the track. So what's being fed into this audio 23, I want to hear what's being fed on the input. I have to turn on the monitoring, and now I can hear this if I solo both of them. You see, now this track goes into this one, and then this one goes into the group and so forth. So what we did is inserted this audio 23 as a middleman between this track and the group track. So the spire goes into this one and then it goes into the group. So now I can move this compressor from the actual track where the synth is to this audio track right here. I can also maybe move this this EQ also the way it was, just like that. Actually, I copied this compressor, so I don't need it there. So now I have the synth right here, and maybe even the filter too. Let's do the filter too. Move that too. So now we have the synth on this track, and we have all the processing on the audio track where it's routed into. So now if I freeze this, and I can freeze it now, you see, if I freeze this track with a synthesizer, what I'm essentially freezing is only the sound of the synthesizer that comes out of the synth. All of the processing that happens is now not frozen. Now I can change the processing after the fact, meaning that even if I sent this project to somebody else to mix it better, they can still access the processing even if the synth and the sound that the synth is making is already audio. It's frozen. So imagine that the person we sent this to doesn't have the synth spire and can't hear it when the synth is, on. With the track frozen like this, is going to gain an audio file instead of that, MIDI and the synth producing the sound. It's going to get the audio file, and then all of the processing is still going to be available. So imagine we can do that for each one of these, and hence, leave the processing, like this EQ right there, leave the processing untouched so that the processing can still be altered even though the synth is already frozen. The synth has already been, as you say, bounced or exported into an audio file and placed on top of this. So this way we are freezing the synth without freezing the FX processing that comes after the synth. Now, if we do this, you see, this is all native Ableton's effects that I'm using right here. So if we do this, we have frozen the synth, it's now audio. I can, let's say, flatten this track So now this track is actually audio all the way, like this. Now, if I do this, I'm ensuring that once I open this project, maybe a long time from now, I will still have all the sounds in it. If this was not frozen, maybe not flattened, but not frozen, and it required Spire. So now I have the sounds, and I'm making sure that maybe in 2 years the Spire that comes out is not going to be compatible, with the presets that I have now. So there could be many problems, different problems with software that you could encounter. And just to make sure that you have your original sounds, that you have your track in the original, state that you left it in, freezing everything will help your situation. And this is how you should actually back up your projects, with everything frozen into audio. Now, you don't have to flatten everything like I did right here. We could go back once and once more. Now, what I have right here, that audio file is still right here. It's still playing an audio file that you just saw. But I still have the notes and I still have the synth. So if I wanted the notes, I could take these. So I could, let's say, make another MIDI track and just copy these notes, since I do have the notes. Or I could make another audio track and copy this audio, because there is audio on top of it, you see. But I still retain both. So I'm retaining the audio information, the original, how the sound is. I'm retaining the synthesizer. I'm retaining the MIDI information, the MIDI notes as they were playing. So this way I have the best of both worlds. I have retained the MIDI, the synthesizer, the settings inside the synthesizer, the audio recording in case the synthesizer in a couple of years is not compatible. So this way I have everything preserved, making sure that my backup is going to play in years to come. One thing you can almost always be sure of is that the producers of digital audio workstations are going to, try very, very hard and ensure that all of their, next releases are backwards compatible, meaning that in a new version of Ableton, you will always be able to open a song from an older version. Doesn't matter which one, even if it's, many versions before. Now, a good thing to mention also is that right now when this is frozen, I have this synth. Obviously, now it's audio playing. This is just, a show for me to know where the notes are. But I can actually take that and copy it somewhere else. And it's still going to play right here. See that? So you can handle arrangement even after you have frozen something. It's only in the case where you want to change the processing or maybe a parameter inside the synthesizer where you would have to unfreeze. But right now, as I have it set up where all the processing is on a separate audio track, the only thing I would have to unfreeze for was to change a parameter inside the synth. Everything else that comes after the processing is still accessible. It's not frozen, meaning that I can still access all the processing. It's only the synth that's been frozen, and that's really great because it narrows down on the list of things that I would have to unfreeze this track for. Of course, I'm also keeping my CPU really unburdened, so that I can use that CPU power for mixing and maybe, more demanding processing effects.